And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at the 10th expansion for Dominion, Dominion Empires. Now this is the second expansion after they told us they were done. So we now just assume that they're going to print out Dominion expansions forever. I'm always going into these new expansions with some trepidation because, I mean, how much more can you add to Dominion? This does add a major new mechanism to Dominion that we haven't seen, but it also expands on a couple that have been in the game before. I'm assuming if you're watching this that you already know how to play Dominion because I'm just essentially looking at some of the cards and you need Dominion or Dominion Intrigue to play with these cards. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at some of the cards that come in the game. First we have Crown, which is actually, I'm showing you this first, but it's actually one of my favorite cards in the set. Crown is kind of like an enhanced version of Throne Room, where you can play an action card twice, but you can also play a treasure card from your hand twice. Mixes with Prosperity, and you can have some really fun times. Here, the Charm, when you play this, you can get +1 buy and +2, which is okay. Or the next time you buy a card this turn, you can gain a differently named card that has the same cost. Now this all depends on there being cards of the same cost. So this is a little temperamental based on the cards that are in the set out there, but it's probably you're going to have some that are very useful. So let's say you buy a card that costs 5, you can get another card that costs 5. It's a pretty handy thing to have, and it's versatile with the 2 options, which makes it worth 5. The Via here is another one of those cards that just gives you a pile of things, +2 actions, +1 buy, plus a coin. However, when you gain this is some of the cards in this set have something when you gain this, whether you buy it or gain it, put it in your hand, you get another action, and if it's your buy phase, go back to the action phase. This is a little wonky trying to explain this one to people. In fact, I almost prefer not to play with this because of this. But basically, when you buy it, you get another action and you go back to your action phase. So you can like start your turn over again almost. The Forum, +3 cards, +1 action, then you discard 2 cards. But when you buy this, you get an extra buy. I don't know how much I like the Forum. Again, it's another one when you buy it, you get a buy. You get 3 cards in action, but you have to discard 2 cards. So essentially you're getting +1 card, +1 action, although it's +1 of the 3 at the top of the deck, essentially. Then we have an attack card here. This is a great one. It's +3, and you can reveal gold from your hand. If you do, each other player discards down to 2 cards in their hand, then draws a card. This card almost feels too good for 5 because it's essentially the same as a gold, but it also attacks the other players. This game also comes with some duration cards. These were introduced in Seaside, cards that will stay in front of you till they're finished. This one here, I really like this one, the Archive, which lets you put 3 cards aside from your hand. So you draw 3 cards, you put them aside, and at the beginning of your next 2 turns, you pick one of those cards and add it to your hand. It gives you some nice planning. You can look at the cards in your hand, decide what other card you want to add. So I do like that one. This one here, until your next turn, it changes the first action card each other player plays to a +1 card, +1 action, and then you get +2 cards your next turn. This is one of those annoyance cards. It really annoys your opponents, especially if they have a cool action sequence set up. It doesn't completely disrupt it because +1 card, +1 action isn't a horrible thing for your action cards to be played into, and it in fact might even help them if they wanted to play both cards in their hand. Then we got Chariot Race. Now Chariot Race brings back the victory point counters. Now these were introduced in Prosperity. They're one of my favorite things that were included in the game. This comes with a whole pile of them. And these are victory points that you can get, and you keep them until the end of the game. They don't go in your deck. So Chariot Race has those. Chariot Race is kind of a, let's reveal the top card of my deck and the person to my left, and whoever, if mine's higher, I get +1 to spend this turn, and I get one of those points. Groundskeeper is the same thing. While this is in play, when you get a victory card, get 1 point. The Farmer's Market. Now this is one of those, this has a pile next to here, a Farmer's Market supply pile essentially. So if there are 4 more of these points here, you can take them and trash the card from your hand. Otherwise, you add 1 here, and then you get 1 coin for each one that's there. So let's say there's 2 there, and I play a Farmer's Market. I put 1 there, I get +3, so that's really good, especially since the card itself costs 3. But as soon as there are 4 there, I'll take these 4 points and then lose the Farmer's Market. So it's an interesting idea. I'm just not sure It's kind of interesting, the more players in the game, because if multiple people are playing with farmers markets, it will change the dynamic of how it works. Sacrifice is a cool card. In fact, another one of my favorite cards from the set, where you get to trash a card from your hand, and depending on what it is, you get some sort of bonus. This is one of my, if this is in the set, it's one of my favorite first cards to buy, because I'll get a bunch of these victory points. 2 victory points, and trash those 3 those 3 initial victory point cards you start with, and then start trashing some of your gold for +2. Just make sure you buy new stuff to take its place, but still pretty handy. The temple here, it can trash 1 to 3 differently named cards. And then this one also has a supply pile where you're going to be putting victory points next to it. And when you buy a temple, you take all the points from the pile. So the temple pile is going to be one of the ones that's going to run out, because as people use it, the more and more they use it, the more other people are going to be tempted to buy them. And the wild hunt. Choose 1 plus 3 cards and add another point to the wild hunt supply pile. Or you can gain an estate, and if you do, take all the victory points from the pile. Very handy. Again, these are the 3 cards with these supply piles. Now let's talk about a new mechanism that's in this set that is in no other set, and that is debt tokens. These cards here do not have a cost. Instead, when you can just take these cards, but you're going to get a certain number of debt tokens in front of you. Debt tokens can be paid off using any sort of thing that pays coins, and you can pay them off immediately, even on the same turn, but you may not buy another card until you've paid off all your debt tokens. So this one here is 8 debt tokens, and very rarely will you have 8 coins in the same turn, but I could take it, and then maybe on the next turn, let's say I have 4 coins this turn, I could use 4 of those to get the debt paid off, and then next turn use 4 coins to pay it off again. This one here, by the way, is +5 cards. It's a better blacksmith, but then you have to get rid of all the coppers in your hand. But you can do some fun strategies, fill your deck with silvers, then the blacksmith becomes extremely powerful. Here you get a card that costs up to 4, then you can trash it to take another card that costs up to 4. The Overlord, which is a really neat card. Basically, you can play it as if it was any card in the supply, costing up to 5. So this one, again, really depends on the cards that are out there. But if there's some neat cards in the supply, and there's usually some that you'll really like, this card is basically a wild card for that. Or here, +2 actions reveal your hand, +1 card for each action card revealed. This is going to allow you to fill your deck with action cards and then just do a whole pile of things with them. And this card, which is another one of my favorites from the game, the Capital card, this one essentially allows you, it gives you 6 for 5. It's way better than the gold, but then you take 6 debt tokens. So essentially you don't even get these 6, you're just borrowing this 6. But it does allow you to buy a really great card and then spend a couple turns paying it off maybe. These are very tempting to use, very dangerous. So besides these, we also have some piles in the game that are dual piles. This is the Capital / Rocks. That means the first 5 cards in the pile are catapults, and the second 5 are rocks. And so you're supposed to put it out like this. You cannot buy the rocks until the catapults are gone. So catapults, for example, are +1. You trash a card. If it costs 3 or more, everyone else gets a curse. If it's a treasure, everyone else discards down to 3. So it's a kind of an attack. It's an okay attack. But once they're gone, you get to the rocks, and when you gain or trash these, you get a silver. If it's your buy phase, put the silver on your deck. Otherwise, put it in your hand. This isn't the only double pile. There's also the Gladiator and the Fortune. This is actually probably my favorite of the double piles. The Gladiators are fun because they're +2. You show a card from your hand. Player to your left has to show that same card. If they don't, you get +1 and trash a Gladiator from supply. So you kill a Gladiator. If there is, and if there's none, you're fine. Killing all the gladiators, getting rid of all the gladiators, brings out the fortune cards, which double all your money. Now look how much expensive they are. They cost 8 and 8 debt. But man, and when you buy it or gain it, you get a gold for every gladiator you have in play. So this is one of those decks that I've never seen put out and people aren't instantly buying the cards, because there's nothing bad about buying a gladiator. Gladiator is a great card to have by itself. Then later on, when these come out, if you can get a fortune, that's going to accelerate the game tremendously. The encampment, and what is the secondary part for the encampment? Plunder. Plunder is a very simple card. It's 2. It's a treasure. It's 2, but it also gives you a victory point. Encampment is +2 cards, +2 actions. And then you reveal a gold or plunder card, one of these from your hand. If you don't, you set it aside and return it to the supply at the start of the cleanup. So encampment is a card that you will get, and it's great, but you have to, it's a one-time use. So you want to get through these as quickly as you can to get to the plunders. And then finally, the last double card. Well, actually, no, there's two more double cards. We have the Patrician and the Emporium. The Patrician is +1 card, +1 action. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's 5 or more, put it in your hand. So I really like the Patrician. It's a very simple card, and it's a possibility of being +2 cards, +1 action for a cost of 2. And then it builds way to the Emporium, which is a better version, +1 card, +1 action, +1 coin. And when you gain this, if you've at least 5 action cards in play, which is possible because it means you might have some Patricians, you get +2 coins. And then finally, the last double card is the Bustling Village and Settlers. Here, this is +1 card, +3 actions. You get to look through your discard pile, and if you find a Settlers, which is the first one, you can put it in your hand. This was only +1 action, but you can grab a copper with it. These are nice. They're nice. I don't know what else to say about them. They're okay. Now, there's also a deck of castles in the game. Now, castles are different. They're kind of like the double cards, but these are put in a very specific order. And you only have one of each if you're playing with 2 players. But you'll see they start with the humble castles, which are 1 coin. They're like a treasure, but at the end of the game, they're worth 1 point for every castle that you have. And then we progress to the crumbling castle. When you gain or trash this, you get a victory point and a silver. So then that's worth 1 point. Then the small castle, where you can trash this or another castle from your hand to get a castle, which is great because the castles keep getting better and more expensive, as you can see. The haunted castle, when you gain this, you get a gold and everyone else has to put 2 cards back on their deck. The opulent castle, you can see they're getting much, much better. Discard any number of victory cards, +2 per card discarded. Great way to get rid of victory points from your hand. The sprawling castle, it's 4 points, and you get a duchy or 3 estates, your choice. Duchy, probably. Or the grand castle. When you gain this, reveal your hand, +1 for every victory point in your hand and or in play. And then the 10-point king castle, which is simply 2 points for every castle you have. So if you get a lot of castles, these can be worth a lot. It's a cool victory point pile, and I wish they had more of these in the game, but this is the only one. The game also comes with events. Now, the way events are played is usually you can put 2 of them into play. You randomly draw 2 of them and put them out. You do not have to play, I mean, you can play with more, you can play with 1, do what you want. But the game recommends that you only play with 2. These were introduced in the last set of Dominion. But the way events work is they're like a card you can buy. So this one's just free. So it's one of your buys on a turn, and then you get to do whatever the card says. So you don't take the card or anything, you get to take an action. So this one's pretty simple. Trash an action card from your hand, and then gain an action card that costs up to 6. And so, as you know, each of these is going to be pretty cool. Like this one here, gain 2 coppers and a non-victory card that costs up to 5. You don't have to do them, but it just gives you another option of things to do. This one here, for 4 coins, I get a point, and then trash a victory card from the supply. It's a way to end the game more quickly. This, if your deck and discard pile are empty, gain 3 golds. So at the right time, right place, the windfall can be very handy. Here, this is one of my favorites. It simply gets you 2 silvers. Then +1 point for each silver you've gained this turn. So if you have 6 coins, would you take a gold, or will you take 2 silvers and 2 victory points? I'll take the 2 silvers and 2 victory points. Several of these cards also have the debt on them. So you can see this one, for example, Annex costs 8 debt, but you can go through your discard pile, shuffle all but up to 5 cards from your hand into your deck, and then get a duchy. This one here, gain an estate, and if you do, get a victory point for each card you've gained this turn. Some of them are money and debt. The wedding is one of my favorite ones. Costs 4 and 3 debt, and it gives you a victory point and a gold. So this is a way, honestly, when you use the wedding, you can get a gold on turn 1. And then there's this ridiculous one, which costs 14 gold, but it gives you a province and 9 extra victory points. So that's a ton of victory points to get for 14 gold. But then, of course, if you have 14 gold, you're doing well. The game also comes with landmarks. Landmarks can be shuffled in the event deck, so you can use some landmarks and some events. I mean, it's up to you, really, how many you play these with. For me, I would play with some of these. I would just shuffle them into the event. Landmarks basically change the way scoring might happen. So, for example, this one here. At the end of the game, when you score, you lose 2 points for every silver and gold you have. That's going to really change how you play the game. The baths here. When you end your turn without having gained a card, you take 2 points off this card, and at the beginning of the game, you're going to put 6 points on this card for each player in the game. So every time you take a turn without gaining a card, you can take 2 points off here. Here, when you get a victory card, take 2 points off there. And again, most of the cards that say that, you're going to put 6 points on. Here at the end, if you have 10 coppers, you get 15 extra points. Is that worth doing? Well, it might change based on how the game works. And there is a lot of these event cards in the game. And each of these will do something differently. I have played with every card in the game, but I haven't played with all these landmarks because there's just so many of them, and I really don't want to use more than a couple per game. Some of them are negative, like here you lose 3 points for every card you have only 1 copy of, and some of them are positive, like here you get a victory point for every non-victory card you have from an empty supply pile. So that's pretty much what's in the game. The game comes with a huge pile, well, relatively speaking, of tokens that you'll be able to use for all these different cards. And that's it. So that's pretty much it. Dominion Empires. There's a lot of cool things in here. Now, some of the cards in here I really like. Some of the cards in here I'm just going to take and throw into the game. And I really, really like the debt mechanism. That is a fun thing for me to mess with because it lets you take these really cool cards and then you take a couple turns to pay them off, and you can kind of find yourself spiraling into debt. Almost a push your luck aspect. I'll be like, oh, I'm going to take this debt card. The next turn you're like, oh man, I could have bought a really great card, but I went into debt and I have to pay off my debt first. That's a good thing to add. If my only complaint about this is I wish they would have maybe made this debt thing the whole central thing of the deck, because there's not a whole ton of cards with debt. And if you play with just this, yeah, it's pretty neat. But usually if you shuffle it into everything else, you're going to end up with 1 card with debt. This is a problem that Dominion has always had, where they have these cool mechanisms that each new set adds. But once you shuffle them in, there's only going to see 1 or 2 of these cards throughout. However, I am glad to see more of the duration cards. Those are good. And this game has a ton, this expansion has a ton of those cards that give you victory point tokens. That's one of my favorite things that Prosperity, which is my favorite expansion, added. So I'm glad to see a lot more of those. There's also the more event cards and more of the new landmark cards, which essentially are event cards, but there's, they change scoring. Alternate things, these are minor variations. These are great and fun to play with. So everything in the set, I kind of went into like, there's a few cards that, like the one I mentioned where if you buy this and you get another action phase, they're okay. But for the most part, I actually like the cards in this one better than like the last 2 or 3 sets. This is one of my favorite expansions. But it is one of my favorite expansions, but I'm an experienced Dominion player. I played Dominion probably 100+ times with all the different, well, more than that, I guess. Especially when you consider online plays of it. I just played this game a ton with all the different expansions and everything. And this expansion caused me to look in the rulebook more than any other expansion, because how does this card work with this? What does this debt do when you take this card that lets you claim a card that costs something or less than? Does that include this card? And so there's a lot of rules questions, and if you're someone new to Dominion, this is not one of the first expansions you should buy. And, Dominion is kind of getting to that point where it probably jumped the shark a few expansions ago, and probably the only people watching this are people who already like Dominion anyway and are getting everything for it. But even though I went into this like, all right, let's see how this works, I have to say I was surprised. Pleasantly. Yes, it's a bit of a rules quagmire for people to go and check everything. And I mean, each time they add a new card, you're like, well, how does Throne Room affect this? And how does this affect this? And how does Bridge work with this? There's all these combinations. And this actually, I keep all my cards stored in one of those art boxes for Hobby Lobby. And this actually pushes that outside the box. I won't be able to keep all the cards. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to take some of the cards and cut them from the mix. I'm not going to be able to keep all the cards in the game. Probably the alchemy cards are going to be out. But for the most part, I do enjoy this. The double decks of cards, it's fiddly, and I won't play with them very often just because they're a little bit more fiddly than most, but it is something interesting. The debt, amazing. More victory point cards, amazing. The new events and the landmarks, really good. So overall, for me, this is excellent. However, I'm saying that for people who are Dominion players are going to really enjoy this. If you're still getting in a game, go get Prosperity, go get Seaside. If you never get to this expansion and you think you have enough, you're going to be fine. But for those who need more Dominion, they haven't run out of ideas yet. That's cool. Just you're going to figure out how all these cards work together. Dice Tower Judgment, excellent if you're experienced in Dominion.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!